During his inaugural address, President Biden called for racial justice and condemned the growing threat of white nationalism. Here's some of what he said.
A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat.
But some GOP lawmakers heard a different message Wednesday, including Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. He accused President Biden of blaming all Republicans in the address.
If you read his speech and listen to it carefully, much of it is thinly veiled innuendo, calling us white supremacists, calling us racist, calling us every name in the book, calling us people who don't tell the truth. And going forward, we're not going to have manufactured or manipulated truth. Well, that's another way of saying, oh, all of my opponents manufacture and manipulate the truth and are liars. He just said it in a nicer way, but that was the
Cliff Albright and Michael Starr Hopkins join me now. Cliff is the co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund, and Michael is a Democratic strategist and founding partner of Northern Star Strategies. Welcome to you both. It's good to have you. Cliff, let me start with you. As someone who works to protect the rights of Black voters, what was your reaction to those parts of the president's inaugural address, and what do you make of Senator Paul's interpretation?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I actually was glad and excited to see that President Biden confronted the issue of white supremacy directly, naming it in his speech. You know, it's ironic that some of the same people that are complaining about him naming what we're seeing, when naming what we saw 2 weeks ago at the Capitol, were some of the same people who years ago said you need to be able to name what they called Islamic terrorism, right? But now they have a problem with naming white supremacy and domestic terrorism. But at the end of the day, President Biden did not say Rand Paul. He did not say Republicans. He didn't name a party or anything like that. He said issues of white supremacy. He mentioned that the truth must prevail. If Rand Paul heard those remarks, in fact, if he heard that entire speech, soaring speech, a very empathetic speech, and the best thing that he took out of it was that he felt like he was personally being attacked when President Biden said white supremacy. You know, there's an old saying, hit dog will holler, right? So if I can't say what Rand Paul is or is not, but if he heard those lines and he immediately identified with them, I think Rand Paul's biggest criticism should be of himself.
Well, Michael, I want to get you in here. What is your take on what we heard from Senator Paul, his observation and interpretation of that?
Look, I couldn't agree with Cliff anymore. The fact that Rand Paul thought that speech was directed towards him says more about Rand Paul than it does about President Biden. You know, look, let's just be honest about this. There weren't people of color in Charlottesville marching the streets saying Jews will replace us. There weren't people of color marching through the Capitol attempting to overthrow the government. There is a white supremacist problem within the Republican Party, and it's a pervasive problem that's been going on for a while. Donald Trump is a symptom of that problem, but that problem has been going on for, frankly, a long time, whether it be Timothy McVeigh or whether it be the shooter in South Carolina at Mother Emanuel. And the quicker we learn to talk about that and actually have an honest conversation, the sooner we can begin to heal and actually deal with it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether other Republicans sort of take up that line of argument that Senator Paul put out there and what it is that they might have interpreted and what their own sort of sense of those words was. I want to ask you about President Trump's 1776 commission, because I think this may have gotten lost a little bit in all of the news with the inauguration, but this commission was created to counter efforts to teach American history in a way that more fully examines the impact of slavery and anti-Black racism. Now, the commission included conservative academics, but there were no professional historians, and the report was released on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So it was interesting because in one of his first moves, President Biden dissolved that commission via executive action, and the 1776 report has since been removed from the White House website. But Cliff, in your view, what do you see as the purpose of President Trump's commission, and what did you make of the timing of that report coming out on Martin Luther King Jr. Day?
It's remarkable. One of my first graduate degree was actually in Africana studies, right, in Black studies from Cornell's Africana Center. I've been dealing with these attacks, these so-called academic attacks on concepts of correcting history, right, of presenting a more complete picture of multiculturalism, which former Secretary of State Pompeo attacked the other day. At the end of the day, when you read the report, it was nothing but more of what we've seen over the past 4 years. It was nothing more than the grievances. It was nothing more than like the distortions and the outright lies. It was the same kind of false information that had led so many people to attack the Capitol 2 weeks ago, thinking that an election had actually been stolen, when in fact all evidence, all legal cases said otherwise, right? That's the kind of information that was contained in that report. I'm very much glad that one of the first things President Biden did was to get rid of that commission and to take down that report, because again, what is it that is so threatening about telling the truth, right? What is it that is so threatening about telling the truth about what our history is? Until we can tell that truth, we're going to continue to have people like the folks that stormed the Capitol feel emboldened because they've been fed a story of history that made them convinced that there was no way that they could lose an election, and that any election that didn't go their way justified them then attacking the Capitol. It comes from this false history and this false narrative that we've been fed so long in our schools. And the fact that they did it on Martin Luther King Day, right, was an intentional insult. It reminds me of how in some states, including Alabama where I live, there are school students that aren't even told when they're sent home for King Holiday that it's because of King Holiday. There are still some states that celebrate it as Robert E. Lee Day, right? Because they find it so, they're so unwilling to acknowledge that Martin Luther King has been granted a national holiday.
Yeah, Michael, Cliff pointed out the fact that the attack on the Capitol laid bare the dangerous, really the deadly consequences of misinformation. What do you see as the wider implications of a document like the 1776 report?
Well, what it does is legitimizes more white supremacy. By failing to acknowledge the truth, it allows people to have false narratives. One of the biggest problems we're dealing with in this country is people have separate truths. What one group believes is different from what another group believes. And when you fail to have shared truths, you can't engage in conversation and you can't engage in reconciliation. And so the more that we continue to see this type of behavior legitimized, the more that we see people like Senator Hawley, Senator Cruz give voice to these type of people, the more we're going to see them empowered. And it's terrifying, because what we saw at the Capitol, we also saw in states like Michigan, where militia groups were threatening to kidnap Governor Gene Whitmer. So this isn't new. It's something we've seen before. It's something we failed to deal with, and something that's going to stick around until we adequately prepare ourselves.
Michael, with respect to the Capitol attack, law enforcement personnel are among those under investigation for that assault. How has that reverberated throughout the Black community?
I think it's confirmed a lot of our greatest fears. The police have historically been used as a weapon against the African American community, and really used to weaponize our bodies. And so seeing law enforcement put in a position where now elected officials have to wonder whether they can trust them, whether they can feel safe, really mirrors the Black experience. And I think it opens the eyes of a lot of politicians to what people who look like Cliff and I go through every single day. It's something that no one should have to go through, but at least now there's a shared experience.
Right. There's just, I think, an examination of elements within our society and all different kinds of organizations and groups. Cliff Albright and Michael Starr Hopkins, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Really appreciate it.